Last year, my friends and I decided to do something different for spring break. Instead of the usual beach trip, we rented a cabin deep in the mountains near a lake. It was cheap, secluded, and had great hiking trails. Exactly what we wanted. There were four of us: me, my best friend Jess, her boyfriend Kyle, and his roommate Mark. The cabin itself was small but cozy, with two bedrooms, a fire pit outside, and a huge back deck overlooking the woods. The nearest town was about 40 minutes away, and we had zero cell phone service. But we brought enough food and booze to last the week, so we didn't mind. The first couple of days were perfect. We hiked, swam in the lake, and sat around the fire at night, drinking and telling ghost stories. The only weird thing was the woods. They felt quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, no animal sounds at all. It was unsettling, but we figured maybe it was just the area. Then, on the third night, things got strange. We had just finished dinner and were outside by the fire when Jess suddenly tensed up. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. We all went silent, straining to listen. At first I didn't hear anything, just the crackling fire. Then, faintly from the darkness of the trees, I heard it. A whistle. Not a bird call, not the wind. A slow, deliberate, human whistle. We laughed it off at first. Maybe another camper was out there, though we hadn't seen a single person since we arrived. But as the night went on, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I kept glancing at the tree line, half expecting to see something lurking just beyond the firelight. When we finally went inside to sleep, I double-checked that the doors were all locked. Sometime later, I woke up to the voice of Jess. "Hey, did you guys go outside?" she asked groggily. I sat up, confused. "What? No, why?" She pointed to the bedroom window. The curtain was slightly open, just enough to see outside. And there, in the dirt just below the window, were footprints. Bare footprints, as though whoever it was not wearing shoes. My stomach dropped. "Maybe they're ours?" I suggested, but I knew they weren't. We hadn't walked around barefoot at all, and these prints were fresh. Just then, Kyle and Mark came out of their room, looking freaked out. "Dude, someone knocked on our window," Mark said. We all stared at each other, terrified. None of us wanted to go outside to check, so we stayed in the living room, keeping every light on until the sun came up. That morning, we cautiously stepped outside to look around. There were footprints everywhere. Around the cabin, by the fire pit, even circling the car. Something else, too. Long scratches on the wooden deck, like someone had dragged a sharp object along the surface. We packed our things and left immediately. The scariest part? As we drove away, I glanced into the woods one last time, and I swear, deep in the trees, I saw a figure standing there, watching us. Last spring, my best friend Mia and I decided to take a road trip down to Florida. We planned to drive straight through, but after almost 10 hours on the road, we were exhausted. We decided to find a cheap motel for the night and continue in the morning. We pulled off the highway into a tiny town, if you could even call it that. It was mostly empty, just a few rundown buildings and a gas station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. The only motel we found was one of those sketchy, single-story ones with flickering neon lights. The guy at the front desk was off, to say the least. He was pale and greasy, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He barely looked at us as he handed over the key, room 6. As soon as we stepped inside, we knew something was wrong. The air was thick and musty, like the room hadn't been aired out in years. The carpet was stained, the bedspread looked ancient, and the bathroom door had deep scratches along the bottom, as if something had tried to claw its way out. Mia laughed it off, saying, "We've stayed in worse," but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. We locked the door, double-checked the windows, the bathroom, and got ready for bed. At around 2 a.m., I woke up to a noise. At first, I thought it was just the wind, and then I heard it again, a soft, slow tapping on the window. Mia was asleep, so I sat up, my heart pounding. The curtain was thin, barely covering the glass, and in the dim light from the motel sign outside, I could see the silhouette of someone standing there, just standing. Then, whoever it was pressed their face against the glass. I gasped and shook Mia awake. "Someone's outside." She groggily sat up, but when she looked at the window, the figure was gone. We sat there, frozen, listening. The room was dead silent, and then, tap, tap, tap. This time, it came from the bathroom door. We both screamed. There was no way anyone could be in there. We had checked when we arrived. Without thinking, I grabbed the keys, yanked Mia out of bed, and we bolted for the car. We didn't even stop at the front desk. We just sped out of there, not looking back. We drove for miles before finally pulling into a well-lit gas station to catch our breath. After some time, I decided to take out my phone and contact someone. And I was confused. My camera roll was open, and there was a new photo. It was dark and grainy, but I could still make it out. A photo of Mia and me, asleep in the hotel bed. Last spring break, my friends and I rented a little beach house on the Gulf Coast. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small place right on the sand, away from the crowded tourist spots. It was perfect, cheap, quiet, and just a short walk from the water. There were 5 of us, me, my roommate Sarah, her boyfriend Jake, his cousin Nate, and our friend Olivia. The first few days were amazing, drinking on the beach, bonfires at night, and lazy afternoons in the sun. It felt like the perfect getaway. A few nights later, we had just finished a bonfire and were heading back to the house when Olivia stopped. "Do you see that?" she whispered. We turned and followed her gaze toward the sand dunes a little ways down the shore. At first I didn't see anything, but then, there, just beyond the firelight, was a man standing at the top of the dunes. He was completely still, not moving, not walking, just watching. Jake called out to him, "Hey man, you good?" No response. The air suddenly felt colder, and a weird silence fell over us. It was probably just some drunk guy, we told ourselves, but something about him made my skin crawl. His posture, the way he stood, too rigid, too intentional. It wasn't right. We hurried inside, locking the doors behind us. That night I had trouble sleeping. I kept thinking about the man in the dunes. Around 3 a.m. I finally started to doze off, until I heard shuffling outside the bedroom window. I froze. The others were asleep, but I could hear it clearly. Footsteps in the sand, moving slowly around the house. I held my breath. The curtains were shut, but I could see a faint shadow shifting outside. The doorknob rattled. I wanted to scream, but I was paralyzed with fear. After what felt like forever, the footsteps finally faded away. The next morning, I told the others. Jake and Nate went outside to check and came back looking shaken. There were bare footprints all around the house. not just at the doors and windows, but circling the entire house, over and over again. We packed up and left that afternoon. As we drove away, I glanced back at the beach one last time. The dunes were empty, just rolling waves of sand. But as we turned the corner onto the main road, I swear I saw something in the rearview mirror. A figure, standing at the top of the dunes, watching us leave. Last spring break, I stayed home alone while my parents went on a trip. I was 19, in college, and already used to being by myself, so I wasn't nervous at all. I figured I'd just relax, binge watch some shows, and enjoy having the house to myself. The first couple of nights were uneventful. I slept in late, ate junk food, and barely left the house. But on that third night, I started feeling unsettled. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just little things. I'd wake up and find a kitchen cabinet open when I was sure I had closed it. I'd hear faint creaks in the hallway, but I told myself it was just the house settling. Then, late that night, I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone when I heard something shift in the hallway. Not a creak, not the usual house noises, a deliberate, shuffling movement. I went still, listening. My bedroom door was open, and from where I was lying, I could see part of the hallway. It was dark, but the faint glow from a street light outside cast enough light to see the outline of the walls. And then, a shadow moved. My stomach dropped. It wasn't fast, not a blur or trick of the light. It was slow, like someone was standing just outside my line of sight, barely moving. I told myself it was my imagination, that I was overtired, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and shined it into the hallway. Nothing. Just the empty hallway leading to the front of the house. I felt stupid, but my nerves were shot. I shut my door, locked it, and tried to sleep. The next morning, I found something that made my blood run cold. The hallway closet door was open. I never use that closet. It's just where my parents store old coats and junk. But there it was, slightly ajar. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at it. Someone had been in the house. That would have been the perfect place to hide. I checked every lock, every window. Nothing was broken. Nothing was stolen. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside, watching, waiting.